Okay, I literally just filmed my other one, so I'm gonna film this one now. This is the longest Viva I think I've written. Took me a long time for some reason. But week 21, this week's question was, what can we learn about American history by examining the Kennedy administration? So, although it is often overlooked in favor of the more domestically transformative late 1960s, the beginning of the decade were highly transformative. Kennedy's administration represented a high point in American history. And Kennedy really influenced political power. He had soft power and the emergence of a distinctive American aesthetic. So, before we dive into our 3 points, a little historical context in kind of this time period of the 1950s, 1960s Cold War era. So, Cold War goes from 1947 to 1991, and so some events, or one event that kind of happened a couple years before the Cold War in 1944 was the Dumbarton Oaks, which was basically the United Nations was formed, and it kind of helped the spread of capitalism in the American political model. And then in 1947, right around, or I guess the year the Cold War started, we have the Truman Doctrine and the Containment Doctrine. And so Truman is really known as a man of the people, and his doctrine is basically, we're not taking threats from the Soviet Union anymore, and we are going to protect the free countries from the communist countries, and we're going to make sure communism doesn't infect other countries, but the countries that already are institutionalized with communism, there's nothing they can do about it, so they're just going to focus on the ones that it's not too late to save. So George Kennan says, quote, whenever the Soviet leadership confront us with dangerous hostility anywhere in the world, we should do everything possible to contain it and not let them expand any further, end quote. So that was kind of the Truman Doctrine, which we get, and maybe this is, kind of maybe one of the points on why we entered the Cold War is to stop communism. So we have the Iran and Guatemala coup in 1953 and 1954, and it's basically, we see it with Iran and oil, and then Guatemala and bananas, both kind of have some issues, and United States wants bananas and oil, but they convert to action to overthrow kind of the foreign government during a peacetime. But they did this kind of with soft power, or I guess manipulation. So we have the how do you say this word? S-U-E-Z, Suzy? That's right. Hungary and Congo crises during like 1956, 1960s. And they were kind of all examples of how America kind of came in and saved the day by providing strong political power and, save these countries. We have the Berlin Wall, very famous with Gorbachev, and so he basically builds this wall to keep all people from leaving the Soviet Union and leaving communism. So we have the wall, which was a part of Cold War, and then we have Zambia, which was probably the most intense event, I feel like, or I guess that's not true with the Cold War and stuff, but it was pretty intense in 1963, where there was African revolutionaries, and they overthrew the government, and a lot of decolonization happened, and so one of the islands just kind of became really popular for immigrants and refugees, and the Africans decided that they wanted to ethnically cleanse the island, and so they just murdered and killed like 20,000 Arabs and Persians. So it was awful. I don't know, I think it's super interesting. And one of the Arabs and Persians, I don't know if he was Arab or Persian, but he escaped and he changed his name, and he is now Freddie Mercury, and we all famously know him for being a part of Queen. So, interesting fact. But let's kind of dive into the specific ways that the Kennedy administration really impacted just the different events in the world, and yeah, more specifically kind of how it affected America, I guess. So although America was at the peak of its political influence around the world, constant tensions with the Soviet Union kept it on edge. And so in 1958, America has a lot of tensions with the USSR leader after Stalin, Kurgushev, I don't know. I'm not saying that right. I don't know how to speak Russian. But he just kind of, it's like one of his quotes is, quote, "We will bury you." So, quote, what a great quote. So there's all this rising tension with the Soviet Union. We have the missile gap debate with Kennedy, and he used it more as a political stunt for campaign. Which a lot of Americans think, because he kind of was saying like, oh, America's behind in making missiles, and we're, behind the Soviet Union, but there was really no such thing, and so it was kind of just a campaign stunt. But yeah, so then we have the Kennedy election, and kind of his wife, Kennedy's wife, really, I don't know, like compares Kennedy administration and their leadership of America kind of to Camelot, and so she quotes a line from this one musical, and it says, quote, "Don't let it be forgot that once there was a spot for one brief moment that was known as Camelot," end quote. And so she uses this to compare it to America, that there's only one room and it's just a brief moment, but it's known as Camelot, just this magical great city. And then she also said that one of Kennedy's favorite quotes was, quote, "There'll be great presidents again, but there'll never be another Camelot again." And so again, this was just like the high point of American power in the world, and Kennedy, it was just compared to Camelot, great times. So yeah, we also have the Bay of Pigs in 1961, which was a failed military invasion of Cuba, and the U.S. kind of wanted to eliminate the leader, Fidel Castro. Eliminate. Sorry, that's not funny. And because he was a strong spoken leader for communism, and so United States, kind of with the Truman Doctrine, I guess you could say, was like, no, we're not handling that, we're shutting you down. And so they tried to save Cuba from communism before it was too late. And this elimination of this leader kind of led to more tension between the United States and and the Soviet Union. Oh my gosh, there's so much to talk about. So yeah, again, I kind of talked about this in kind of what was going on, but we have the Berlin Wall. So again, this creates more tension, and there's just a lot of like back and forth growing tension between the United States and Soviet Union. So Vietnam also, France leaves Vietnam. They leave like all their colonies, so Vietnam is finally kind of free and on their own, and they divide into North Vietnam and South Vietnam. and the North becomes communist, and the South is free and liberated the way it should be. Anyways, so the United States obviously supported the South side because they were conservative and believed in freedom, and so Kennedy gave them a lot of intelligence operatives and military advisors, and Graham Greene, he was an American writer, and he wrote this book called The Quiet America, and it was just a book that kind of really encouraged young idealistic Americans, and it was kind of the idea that third force to rule nation was not really, it was kind of like a third idea versus like colonial or communism. Like it was kind of like this third idea, and a lot of his ideas led to a lot of violence in America, and which eventually led to his death. Again, kind of, I talked about this in just the other video I just filmed, but if it's not, I've also heard this, I don't remember who said it, but somebody said if it's not like pure freedom and pure liberty and capitalism, it will eventually turn into communism, because a communism always wants to conquer and control people, so it never stops trying to conquer people. So anyways, sorry, little tangent, but it leads to his death, so you can just kind of see this rising tensions with communism versus freedom, and United States and Kennedy versus Soviet Union. So then we have the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, which kind of was the peak of all of the tension between the United States and the USSR during the Cold War. So it was kind of called mutual asserted destruction, and so it's like, okay, we have all these nuclear bombs, we have all these, and so you do this, we're gonna do this. So it's like kind of this like deterrence of like I don't know, I can't describe this right now, just kind of this like deterrence of firing off nuclear weapons at each other, because they both have them and they're both powerful enough to destroy the other side. So it's kind of like tension. And then we have Kennedy's assassination in 1963. So the Cold War ended in 1991, so he died in 1963, and that was kind of a big deal. And we have the Beatles wrote a song for him to say how sad they were. And I don't know, Kennedy's death was a big deal for America, because he was such a strong political figure, and he had a lot of political power and leadway with the other countries. Okay, anyways, point 2. So we have, although we tend to think about America power in terms of military strength, soft power is often more effective at influencing world events. So what is soft power? Soft power is basically the ability to persuade a country or others to do what you want without using force. Churchill says, quote, "The empires of the future are the empires of the mind," end quote. And so again, all these kind of views are backing off of each other. But I think week 19, we talked about how war, the perspectives of good and evil changed, and so war is now looked at as less of a political tool and more of evil and bad. And so people kind of like more soft power and I guess more politics to figure things out. So I think we can see this a lot when you watch Kennedy's speeches or just see pictures of him. Like, he's a very young, youthful, attractive guy. He really kind of portrays that into America with just this youthfulness and culture and technology that he changes and furthers. So we kind of have this culture of the Cold War, which was not only economic but also political battle. And I think you can kind of see this again just with like point 1 and kind of all the world events that were happening during this time, you just see this tension not only between the United States and Soviet Union, but also freedom and communism, and it's all coming to the point of a break. And so soft power has a huge play in this, because the cultures of United States and USSR clash. And yes, so for example, Louis Armstrong, we all know him. What a Wonderful World. He was kind of the symbol of the United States culture during this time and foreign policies, and his title was the Goodwill Jazz Ambassador. And so he really represented America all over the world. And yeah, he was a super helpful guy for that. I think he says, and he was also kind of like a again, how we talked about last week, he was probably a part of the neo-bohemian group. But Louis Armstrong says, quote, "Love, baby, love. That's the secret. Yeah, if lots of us loved each other, we'd solve a lots of more problems. And man, this would be a gasser," which basically means really great world. So he, again, was kind of this like hippie guy. But yeah, he really represented American culture, and obviously Soviet Union, Stalin, the wall, communism, very different cultures, from kind of that hippie peace out to like, this is what we're doing and you're gonna do this or we're gonna kill you kind of attitude. So anyways, we also, technology really changes and is just really has significant changes during the 60s. We have the space age, which is the man on the moon, and Kennedy really wanted to beat the Soviet Union in this space race. And again, this is just more soft power and more not really war stuff, but kind of like, oh, we need to beat them in this game, you know. So he really wanted that, and NASA told him that they thought it was going to be like too challenging because they didn't have enough technology, and they didn't, and which is kind of interesting. And when I read about this point, I thought of like the movie Hidden Figures, where all of the black women, or I guess they were working for NASA, but they were doing all the math by hand. They were, figuring all of it out on like chalkboards, calculators, like writing it all out. So it's like, like if you like watch that movie and just like, you really get, I feel like, a picture of how technology was really kind of crazy during this time period, and how they got somebody to the moon and back with that amount of technology. It's pretty crazy. And they also, Telestar, which we watched the documentary on, which is a lot more technology, and it gives a huge triumph and a huge advantage for communication with world leaders, because it is the first satellite, right? Is that how you say it? Satellite. Yeah, and then also we can, again, another point of soft culture is kind of literature and art, and the CIA actually uses literature and art as weapons and to get out messages and propaganda. And I'm getting, this is a long Viva, I need to stop. I told you, longest Viva I've done. Okay, whatever. Okay, let's just move on to our final point. So our final point on how this is kind of the peak of American power is the I guess, okay, I have all the clauses for all of these. It's so cool. So although jazz emerged as a distinctive American genre, the 1960s saw a bold new self-confidence in America. Aesthetics, which grew because international interest in American products, from abstract expressionism to its surf rock. Again, I feel like all these points and all these vivas are kind of just building up on top of each other, but like the viva I just filmed, you know, there's just a lot more confidence and kind of individualism or uniqueness that America is kind of going towards. And even with their political and their soft power, like I feel like this is kind of the first time when America's like, no, we're standing up for not only us, but we're standing up for like the idea of freedom across the world versus just America. And so this is seen in the aesthetics of America, which if we look at Kennedy's fashion set and his wife's fashion set, this really sets the tone for the American fashion style. And Kennedy's presidential library says, quote, "In the world of fashion, Mrs. Kennedy became a trendsetter." Pop off. Her taste influenced designers, magazine, newspapers, and the public. And so she just becomes this really image of the classic American style. I lost my card. Yeah. And, you know, President Kennedy has becomes a classic style for the men. And so we see these kind of bold pants, Oxford shirts, the shaggy dog sweater, your classic American style. Also, if we look at the architecture of this time, it is like super artistic and like different from what we've seen before in American architecture, and it just kind of looks space looking, and it's just kind of like woohoo, like I don't know, I think it's kind of like a party. Anyways, music is again great part of the aesthetic movement, where people are getting more bold, more independent, more unique, more confident with their how they want to play music. And so we kind of see this blend of blues and country, and that becomes really popular. The Leathermen kind of blend rock and the doo-wop and like the vocal style, which is kind of like the doo-wop, into this time period. And so this is kind of where we get the Californian sound, like the Beach Boys for a famous example. Love the Beach Boys. So we get these really great harmonies and just this essential like classic sound of the 1960s surf rock. So go listen to some Beach Boys and you will hear just the vocals that play a huge role in the harmonies and just the kind of beachy vibes. So the Beach Boys kind of were an OG family. They were a family which I did not know till this Viva, and they were the first American group to really elevate the American sound, like Kennedy with fashion, Beatles, not Beatles, I'm gonna say, okay, whatever, that's not a good story. Okay, so whatever. So I need to finish, this is almost gonna be 30 minutes. Okay, so they became this really great American original sound, and it's the height of the music, and it's kind of, people equate it to the classic European composers of classical music. They kind of equate that to the Beatles, the Beach Boys. And so I kind of mentioned this before, but they were big fans of Kennedy, and when he was assassinated, they wrote the song "The Warmth of the Sun" in honor of him. And so we can just see kind of how Kennedy influenced different aesthetic groups and trends and musicians, and like even Louis Armstrong, you know, like he was a political figure in some sense. But Elton John, he kind of says that, quote, the Beach Boys are what America is, end quote. So again, just kind of becomes this classic American lifestyle. And yeah, again, just America becomes more confident in our ideas, and what it becomes more about ideas versus like how can we make our country profitable. And Kennedy is really a part of this not movement, but like it's just a high point of creating the tension. Okay, I'm just gonna do I'm getting too wrapped up. Okay. Although it is often overlooked in the favor of the more domestically transformative late 1960s, the beginning of the decade were highly transformative, and the Kennedy's administration represented a high point in American history. And again, Kennedy really influenced the political power, obviously. He had a lot of soft power that he put into play, and he kind of really influenced the immersion of the distinctive American aesthetic. So yeah, sorry this is so long. Oh my gosh, don't watch this. Okay, goodbye.